Let us open our session, Women in Innovations and Science. My name is Rahim Oshakbayev, and I had an honor to moderate this session. Let us talk about the role of women. Let's talk about gender inequality. Let us talk about how we will be able to make our policies more balanced. Let's talk about the family contradictions when we are talking about gender equality. And at the beginning, I would like, first of all, to give the floor to the Deputy Prime Minister of the Republic of Kazakhstan, Chairman of the National Committee on Women's Family and Demographic Policies, Madam Gulshara Abdikhalikova. First and foremost, I would like to welcome all guests of our economic forum. Rosa Isakovna, ex-president of the Republic of Kyrgyzstan. I'm very glad to see you here because very recently we were in Bishkek and had a big meeting under the auspices of SCO, and I would like to thank everybody for a possibility to make a statement in front of you. Good afternoon again, dear ladies and gentlemen, dear participants of this forum. It goes without saying that science, innovation and business is one of the prerequisites for prosperity by 2030, and the role of women is growing annually in the area of achievement of SDG based on equal thinking. Therefore, the topic about today's discussion is of paramount importance, which is undoubtful. Therefore, expansion of the role of women in business innovations and science is one of the priority of the global agenda. And today, among the scientists, we have less than 30% of women. According to UNESCO data from 2014 through 2016, only 30% of women decided to become scientists or engineers. Therefore, to reach equal and full-scale access of women to science, as well as to secure gender equality, UNO announced the 11th of February, the International Day of Women and Girls in Science. Today, on the initiative of the first president, Yelbasi Nur-Sultan Nazarbayev, we are developing the new economy, which has to break free from raw materials dependence and based on innovations. Taking this into consideration, we are also trying to put some priorities in the science related to bio-IT technologies, metallurgical industry. And the share of women scientists during the last years has increased from 1.56% to 52.8%. All in all, in 2008, the share of the women scientists amounted to 2,017 ladies. And out of 1,770 researchers, 560 women scientists were conducting them, whereas in the frame of the new program for 2018-2020, there are 418 women who are participating in scientific research, representing 38%. 5 women were awarded the state premium of the Republic of Kazakhstan in the area of science and engineering, named after Al-Farabi, which is the recognition of achievement of the scientists and engineers in our country. And we have to stress and we have to underscore the first academic of Central Asia, Naila Bazanova, Professor Naila Bazanova, who laid down the foundation to physiology of agricultural, of the farming animals. There are some achievements in biotechnologies, molecular biology, contributed by Nagimait Khozhina, who was the ex-president of the National Academy of Sciences. And there was also a very powerful impulse to the harmonious development that was boosted up by International Astana Expo 2017 International Fair, which demonstrated 193 projects, and The forum, Women for the Energy of the Future, was conducted with great success because there were 300 participants from 25 countries of the world participating in it, and now we are promoting the innovative Heritage of Expo 2017, and we are trying to introduce 133 various technologies in different sectors of industry, out of which 63 are in the area of renewable sources of energy, power supplies, etc. And one of the key areas of our national policy is the economic promotion of women. We are developing the cooperation with international financial institutions, and this is the reason for which today women of Kazakhstan are very actively participating in SMEs, and today they established 1/3 of jobs in this particular sector. According to the Global Economic Forum, as of the 2018 in our country, in terms of gender disruption, and according to the index of women's involvement into economy, is placed number 32. And finally, dear colleagues, I would like to quote the Secretary General of UNO, Antonio Guterres: let us make sure that every girl, wherever she is, will have a possibility to implement, to put into practice her dreams and to become mature and contribute to the sustainable future for all. And I believe that there is a huge potential of women in the development of science and innovations. This is the reason for which this particular area of activities should be very active, and we have to promote it jointly. Thank you. Thank you very much, Gulshar Naushaevna, distinguished participants. Our our event will consist of two parts, because in the first part we will propose 5 presentations by 5 speakers, and then in the second part we will have a kind of hard talk format. And with great pleasure I would like you to watch a video about the First Lady President in our region, Rosa Iskakovna Atumbayeva.
Country, 6 million population on the 200,000 square kilometers field, and we are a multi-ethnic country. More than 100 ethnic groups live in my country since we remember ourselves. We are learning market economy, we are learning democracy. We are facing all these challenges of multiculturalism, and we are going through all these difficulties and a lot of conflicts, a lot of tensions, a lot of problems we face this day. We are only country in Central Asia which exercise today parliamentarism, which is very difficult stuff to do. Democracy is the most difficult governance, we understand. Nevertheless, we continue on this road, and I do believe that Kyrgyzstan is now on the right direction, and certainly will be on the road to democracy and prosperity. From the beginning, I was not dreaming to be president. I was not dreaming to hold big power. And it didn't come from the sky to me. I was a leader of opposition in the parliament. Мен Отунбаева Роза Исаковна, Кыргыз Республикасынын президентинин кызматына киришип жатып.
After the 2010 events, Rosa Otunbayeva had the courage to take the responsibility to convene a new constitution of this country, which has literally transformed the country from the authoritarian regime to the democratic parliamentary rule.
I set the example that we should transfer the power. It is not yours forever. It is not something immanent to you. You should transfer the power by constitution.
Постпрезидентство, вот она как раз таки пример показывает.
So she's setting up the example of former president, and it is not just the activity of the president, but she is forming political culture in the society. She is also forming the public opinion on education and education for children.
Эжен абдан күтүшөт. Анткени бүгүнкү күндө бирден бир Кыргызстандагы өтө таасирдүү эл кабыл алган жана ийгиликтин модели сыяктуу кабыл алат дагы.
You can feel how deeply she is committed in the diversity, and how deeply she is committed in the peace and security in the region.
We want to be country in peace and understanding each other in our multi-ethnical society, and respectful to each other. And this is our power, certainly.
Аплодисменты. Роза Исаковна, пожалуйста.
Please applause Rosa Isakovna, you are welcome. It's a great honor for us, your presence here at our forum. Maybe it will be more convenient for you to be here. Distinguished participants of Astana Forum, dear girlfriends, it's one of the last sessions, therefore I'm calling on you to get relaxed a little bit, because it was a marathon run for us during these 2 days. I would say that it's a very rich forum, because for the first ever time I came here in 2013, and of course at that time it was a fresh project which was only being developed. I know that in China or Azerbaijan they are trying to conduct similar forums, but this time I was really very much impressed, and I was actually charged intellectually with very interesting ideas, because such a pool of very interesting people was represented here at the Astana Forum, and therefore we received a lot of unforgettable and very interesting, powerful ideas. Our today's topic is women in business, science and innovations, but I was allowed to say a few words about women in politics, in management, because a woman will make it differently from men. And women can make their countries successful, because everybody who is assuming power, as in our country people say, the person was elected by the people, by the time, and possibly by God. But it's when you undertake this burden, and I'm really very happy that I covered such a bumpy road in my life, and when my country needed my skills and competences, my knowledge, my connections, I actually found myself in that very difficult period when my country was developing, and at that time I was the president during an interim period, and we were really on the verge of breakup of our statehood, because all branches of power were destroyed, and in Bishkek, on the square between our White House, the parliament actually ran away. The president left the country, and then he was his powers, his mandate was revoked, and therefore the executive branch of power also decided to terminate its mandate when they saw that about 100 people were shot dead on the square, and they said, okay, it's the game over. And then the president wrote an official paper stating that he's going to step down the office. Therefore, it was a very dramatic step in the development of our country. Kazakhstan is showing a very different example, the example of evolutionary political development, which is one of the principal standpoints voiced by Yelbasi in the development program of your country. However, in our country, in Kyrgyzstan, it happened so that the corrupted power, which went bankrupt, tried to retain the power, and our youth stood up and they said, now or never. And they were fighting until the very end, unless the power was transferred. And therefore, this burden was on my shoulders, and we all were representing the opposition. I was the leader of the Social Democratic Party opposition. We were all in all only 11 people, and 90 people all in all in the parliament. So out of 90 parliamentarians, MPs, we were only 11 people. So we were a small team of people, but we were very courageous and brave, and we were opposing during 5 years of Bakiyev's power. They, of course, wanted to take more than during 13 years of Akayev's power. They were trying to privatize almost everything. So every time when we were opposing those ideas in the parliament, they simply switched off our mics, and therefore we had to bring megaphones and cry out, and each time when they were turning on our microphone, everybody, the rest of the MPs were really paralyzed because they were fearful of what else they will hear from me. And so I would say that it was a very different political story, and all this time is now yielding such results, according to which we consider ourselves to be a parliamentary democratic country. We said, okay, the main decision-taking point should be our parliament, and the concentration of power in the hands of the president leads to nowhere. So after the 2 presidents, such decision was taken, and about a dozen of various parties participated in that fight. And when everything happened on the 10th of April, it happened so that this mission was transferred to me to follow this path. It's not because I was the smartest or the prettiest among all, but I was the opposition leader, and therefore I deserved, in the sense that the people recognized me. They knew that at that time I was the voice of justice. And it was the choice of opposition, because all men were counter-opposing each other, and every one of them wanted to become a leader, wanted to become the president. And I believe that we had our own example when a woman can actually become a point of consensus, when everybody will believe that, yes, of course, everybody very strong. Everybody wants to be the leader. Everybody wants to be the president. But now, let us make sure that a woman, the mother and the sister, will gain this power and will lead the way. So we had two elections, and we put together the new parliamentary membership, and we also conducted a referendum during which I was confirmed as the interim president. And of course there were a lot of fights and skirmishing, and many people said that she was not elected, she fell down from the sky. Well, but my name is mentioned in the text of the constitution, and therefore the referendum actually introduced me as the president for the interim period. And finally I conducted presidential election, and therefore we rehabilitated all branches of power. And by doing so, we managed to integrate the country. We managed to integrate two separated parts, the parts which disintegrated during a year and a half. The mission was completed.
Вся команда.
And my team, we undertook all the possible endeavors to bring our country into the peaceful path, and we have never went away from the international rules. And we did have some problems whereby the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and other institutions were seeking for somebody who was elected, and probably a month and a half or 2 months the whole country was hanging on my shoulders as the leader of the transition time. And later, when the referendum confirmed my nomination, I then started visiting all possible meetings and events that were organized by various institutions such as Shanghai Cooperation Organization, CIS, and others. And we went into the framework of business as usual. What I'm telling you all that just to demonstrate that you are probably aware of the whole history, but at the same time, I would like to say that women during the most crisis time are riding the horse. They can cope with the problem. It is women who make the country recognizable, or if you wish, they could make the country known as a country of success, because indeed we had very dramatic cases where in the south we had the inter-ethnic conflict. It was a very difficult time because there were fights between Uzbeks and Kyrgyz when two ethnic groups crashed, and we couldn't cope with that. We couldn't address that. It was our fault. We recognized that it was our fault, but this wasn't provoked by us as the temporary government. And the historians will definitely talk about that and write about that, and there may be some investigations about that to follow. But the fact is that we managed to carry out the international investigation. You know, in the post-Soviet countries, there have never been any cases of international investigations. However, there were lots of conflicts. There were a lot of hot points. However, no international cases were carried out, and we did that. This was the requirement of President Karimov, and this was required by our opposition, and the international committee really recognized that there was no genocide in the south, there were no war crimes or military crimes. There were some crimes, but they had to be further investigated in the courts if needed. I think I've covered almost the whole story, and on the 1st of December 2011, I resigned to the newly elected, to transfer the power to the newly elected president, and I consider that it was my obligation. I consider that women never conceive, never lie. They always do whatever they are obliged to do. They keep their honest word both to the children and to their countries, and women are also recognizable in the international context, and the success of a woman can be predetermined by her position, by her industriosity, by her knowledge, and by her knowledge that she has accumulated for many years. I would like to thank you for your listening to me, and I believe that the topic that we're discussing today, a lot is said about it. There are lots of studies about that. And we are still in transition period, when we don't have enough resources, and probably we went too far away from that. We maintained the Academy of Science, but the energy sector and the mining sector that has always been the foundation of the economy of Kazakhstan. In those sectors, you will never find women in certain positions or in the quantities that you could have found in the Soviet Union. That is, there are women who do the accounting, who work in the canteens, and today it is a rare thing that a woman can be an engineer or can go for various geological exploration activities and would manage a power station. I would like to see more women in digitalization, in new high-tech. This is still the best wish yet. In digitalization, we are lagging behind Kazakhstan, we lag behind Russia. The World Bank did a snapshot of our position compared to Russia and Kazakhstan. To some extent, Uzbekistan is getting ahead of us regarding the broadband lines. I would like to stress that in entrepreneurship, we were quite good. And the majority of the labor migrants are still women, and they are quite good in businesses. But if we are talking about real business, such as lifestyle, hairstyle, and beauty salons and retail, we have 300,000 women involved in garment making. You know that we like calling ourselves a sewing machine of Central Asia, and many others can very quickly take this priority from us, and that could be done in Uzbekistan. So we still have, we are still the most competitive in this regards. This is the brief survey. I'm not going to abuse your time. Thanks for your attention, and I would like to wish our session, which has been prepared for quite a while. They contacted, the Expo women contacted me regarding this event several months ago. We discussed a lot of issues. We had to make this movie, and I saw how much detailed work is being done to put it all together and to gather so many people for this session within such a very successful forum, which is highly demanded. Dear friends, Let us always be brave. Let us always be talented. Let us keep ourselves in good shape, and the road will always be open for us. Thanks a lot for your presentation, for your amazing story. Let me ask a question. Women in your person have played a good stabilizing role in crisis. Does it mean that women are only in demand in politics when men spoiled everything that badly? We have discussed quite a while today how to use G Global, and SDG are not always implemented properly. Some people just don't know, don't understand what this SDG means. But I personally believe that we always need a personality for any business. If there is a person, and many presentations have mentioned that, if there is a political will and leadership, many programs will obviously be implemented. I'm not talking about myself, but when I became a president, being a woman, I introduced some innovations which have become a good road. The Supreme Court is headed by a woman. The General Prosecutor has become a woman. The President of the National Bank is a woman. Later, after me, the Accounts Committee was chaired by a woman. And all that was not because I signed the documents and said she's going to be appointed. They were all professionals, and after being screened by me, they had to go through the parliament. And in Kyrgyzstan, we tried to cover all possible positions which have never been appointed by women, and they have always been good at doing these jobs. And there was no position that the woman cannot master and could not cope with. For all the positions in the government, women can work, and we have to strive to achieve it. Yesterday we had a Shanghai Forum of women, and I made a note that definitely we have in Tashkent the shoulder or the branch of the Shanghai Organization combating terrorism. And since we're having generals, women generals, they can operate there as well. So we just don't grow them in our countries. And secondly, which I also mentioned during that meeting, is that for us it is surprising that whatever organization we take, Tatiana Volovaya is not available here at this meeting today, but Shanghai organization is already 17 years old. It's quite successful. It's well established with good reputation, and everyone knows her. But it is for the first time they included the women agenda into the context of Shanghai organization. There is a Shanghai spirit and everything is there, but this soft power is missing there that the women have. Women have all those soft power skills that all the scholars are talking about, and that we have to train our children to know about it, and bankers know about it, and they pay for training their staff to use those soft skills. And until we have all this framework in place and all the institutions are operating using the soft power, they will not move. And I hope that Eurosec will understand this gap and would quickly fill it. Thanks a lot. Applause. If Kyrgyzstan is lagging behind from the point of view of digitalization, but from the point of view of involvement of women in the economy, we are behind. I would like to invite Asel Yakova, who is the Director of Global Innovative Program for the Development of Drones and IAES Corporation.
To address the issue of carbon footprint greenhouse gases from the electric sector. The AES Corporation is one of the leaders in new technologies for renewables and energy storage. It's a Fortune 500 company. Our mission is accelerating a safer and greener energy future.
Right now we have around 8 wind farms. Each farm has different capacity, starting from 50 turbines up to 300 turbines.
They cover large spans of geography and land. They're spread across hilltops and mountainsides.
All these turbines need annual inspections. Originally, it could take up to 2 weeks to do one inspection. We partnered with leading drone service company Measure. Right now with drones, we can do it in 2 days. And this is safe and quick.
For a wind turbine inspection, we go out with our pilots, and what we're looking for is cracks or defects, things that may need to be repaired.
On a typical inspection, we're coming back with 30,000 images. Spending 4 weeks reviewing images, I don't think anyone's going to argue that that's the best use of a highly trained engineer's time.
How do we speed that up, and how do we make it 10x more efficient? That's where machine learning and AI comes in.
We've built a great end-to-end solution using Google Cloud's tools and platform. With the AutoML Vision tool, we've trained it to detect damage. We're able to eliminate approximately half of the images from needing human review. The remaining 50% of their time can now be very focused on identifying that damage and really determining the right course of action to remediate it. Moving from reviewing images to training machine learning models, it's a much higher order employment opportunity for people and one where we're trying to develop our team. Google Cloud has been a great partner. Their technology is consistently among the world leaders and are just a great partner to work with person to person. At the end of the day, we won't reach the cleaner energy future without advanced tools like machine learning.
Technology will allow renewable energy to be cheaper than conventional energy. Artificial intelligence, robotics, this is really what the future is all about.
Good afternoon, dear guests, participants of the forum. For me, it is a great pleasure and honor to speak to you. We are living in the era of transformation, digitalization, adaptation of new technologies. And now I would like to present to you my story, because in front of you is the daughter of Steps, who is now managing a big program in 15 countries, and at the moment our program is leading globally. For 2 years we have been among the top 3 to adopt drones and robotics globally after NASA. So we have something to share, we have something to tell. Here you see a couple of images, but these are just small snapshots of what we are doing. This is the outcomes of our works. In 2017, AES has become a global energy company. It has the assets of different types, including solar, wind, thermal, distribution lines, hydropower, more than 100 businesses. When the company decided to express itself as a leader in innovations in energy sector, this has become a major message, and in the industry they decided to organize the formal program. And since I was the certified professional project manager, I worked at AES Kazakhstan, where I managed mail contracts to construct power stations, turbines, and I managed national corporations in China and managed multi-million projects. And after successful completion, they invited me to the headquarters to manage this program. This is the most innovative program, not only in the sector but in the company as well. And previously I never dealt with drones or robots, and this was a challenge when I thought that this is the future and I want to be a part of this future, and if I miss some of the competences, I have to learn and have to be there and be successful. So my bravery and belief in myself were the key points, and I'm going to focus on such things whereby me as an ordinary person, a girl that was born in a small village, who was brought up without water, without electricity. So I'm from the ordinary people, and I didn't have any backup in the form of successful parents or whoever, and I'm the person who achieved whatever I wanted. That's why I keep motivating girls and ladies to become mentors, to become managers during these 3 years. These are the outcomes of our work. We attracted the most advanced companies as partners, the best drone companies, Google, and now we are involving GE to find new solutions. So in partnership with the leading companies, our program, as I said, has become a leader.
And I did not mention here that this year I have become a member of the Coalition Council on robotics and drones in the energy sector. It's a global coalition, therefore I'm the council member, and I'm your compatriot, and I would say that it is for me a kind of implementation of my dreams, the dream of my childhood, and I'm trying to analyze how I turned out to be in the United States and how I turned out to be in the epicenter of the new technologies, and I think that it's coming from my childhood, because when my mother was asking me to help her about the house and to clean the house, I was just dreaming when I will be able to have a robot who will take care of it. And today I live in the reality at the time when this is becoming a reality. And here there is a very short overview. I'm not going to overload you with a lot of technical data, but just for you to understand the different technology of robotics and drones, what is actually used by the company. There are aerial, there are underwater drones and surface drones. And here you see how people used to work before we started using the drones. You see that there are mountaineers, there are engineers who were risking their lives. They were working under very high temperature or very low temperature. You know that energy sector is a high-risk sector of industry where the mortality rate is very high. And one of the main missions of our programs, its actual value is to save the lives of people and to improve efficiency. Therefore, the value of this program is really coinciding with my personal value, because I really love to work on the projects which are creating something, which are saving lives of people, even though many people believe that probably robotics will result in the loss of jobs. But this is a different topic, and I just wanted to briefly mention you that we have to be retrained as soon as the new technologies will become a reality of our life. And this is what happens. So you have seen how we were taking care, how we were maintaining our nets before, and now you see how we do it now. For example, if there is even very limited space with very high temperature, which is like a pipe, nevertheless we do have a ball-like drones which can withstand such high temperatures and go inside and check integrity of the equipment. Last year we saved only $10 million US thanks to the cost reduction in our budget. For example, previously we used to pay that much money for maintenance and repair works, but now when we introduce new technologies, we improved the life safety conditions. And here I would like to note this video, by the way, was presented during Google conference in San Francisco, Google Cloud Next. It was a very cool conference with 35,000 participants. It was something, like really big conference, and we presented that video that you have just seen, and we as Google partners and as a very high-tech company, we were showing how we are doing things from the point of view of machine learning. And what you see on this slide, you see the key success factors for women in innovations and technologies. And 2 weeks ago I made a presentation at AVISI conference, which is the largest global conference on robotics and drones. There were more than 2,000 audience that we were discussing at the panel discussion, and I was also moderating the women's discussions. And this particular topic, I believe, is really very important, and I decided to pick it up as the topic of discussion for my group. And we, upon the results of that discussion, drew the following conclusions. As you see, on the left is indicated the age from 0 to 6, from 6 to 12, and this particular age is particularly important for involvement of women into innovations and technologies, because during this age, the parents play a significant role in upbringing children. Are we going to buy only ready dolls for the girls, or we buy Lego, or we buy some logic games, or we buy small kitchenettes? Therefore, the girls from very early age become very adaptive, because their eyes are already used to Lego, to robotics, and so the toys are very important there. The school children, the school environment, teachers, laboratories available, and experimental base are very important at the initial step of the education in secondary school, in the primary schools, because in the United States there are a lot of clubs where the children can be involved into robotics, do simulations, modeling, etc. But it is very expensive, because it costs like $500 per month, and not so many families may afford it. And in addition, usually only boys become members of such clubs. And the next age is very important as well, from 12 to 20, because at this age it becomes evident that, for example, some girls are keen on technical areas of activities and technical grounds, and they see that they might be very successful if they continue learning, and then they start preparing for enrollment into the university. And it is very significant to have various discussion clubs, and it's important, in other words, to create incentivizing environment for the girls. And at the age of 20-25, when the girl is graduating from the university, let's suppose that she's got brilliant education in IT or technological sciences, but since we are an Asian country, many girls believe that at this period of time, from at the age of 20 to 25, many girls would like to get married and to have babies, and this step is very important, very significant, because we talk mainly about women. When women start working in some companies, where the majority of staff are men, and the girl does not see any roles for her. Sometimes she believes that it will be much better to get retrained and become just a manager and not to be involved into science, because the girls believe that it will be better to start a family and to have babies. And now the girls start doubting whether or not they have to continue their scientific research. And I believe that the family support, the mentors, coaching, and the teachers are playing a very important role. 25 to 35 years, I believe that this is the maturity and the development of a successful employee. And if the girl is working in a certain sector of industry, if she's successful, she will continue this path. Because she has already accumulated a certain experience, and she can actually express herself as a specialist. At this particular point, there might be some competition, for example, among a team of IT specialists or scientific experts, and out of 20 or 25 people, usually they say, yeah, it should be one of the men, and probably the girl who is the only team member will never be delegated to participate and make a presentation at a big conference. And I can tell you about this type of stereotype based on my experience, because if you work in such a sector of industry, and when in the company the management is asking who will be delegated to the conference, during such at such moments, I usually have and I exercise my right to voice my opinion, which is very important. And what I say is that I'm the head of this department, and therefore I will have to be mandated to make a presentation. And what I tell to my management is that since you are stating that you are following the ideas of inclusive development, you have to do it. You have to delegate me. You have to give me this right to make a presentation. And I said that is going to be only of advantage for you. And during the panel discussion, I was making a presentation. There were representatives of the White House, FAA, and of course the majority of them were elderly people, very old men with gray hair, stout, and I was the only Asian young girl, and this picture was circulating in all social media. And I said, well, you see, you are keeping on your policy, and by doing so, I'm trying to express myself openly, and I'm not trying to hide away somewhere in the shadow. Now, this factor is also very important, and I was included into this agenda to talk about my success story, but I would say that it's a very sensitive issue, because when you stand in front of the audience, probably it will be appropriate to talk about success story if, for example, I go to the outer space, or if I'm awarded Nobel Prize. But for the time being, I'm still learning, and I'm still on my way to success, and I keep learning every day. And this is the reason for which, as of today, I have the following conclusions. What is actually working for me right now? I believe that what is very important is to think big and to have big dreams, and everything starts with it, because it is the driving force when you take any decision. And what is also very important is planning. Without planning, our life becomes very chaotic, because the whole life of every person is a big project which consists of different milestones. Therefore, correct long-term and short-term planning is very important. If I can tell you very sincerely that I've got a plan for the upcoming 100 years. Okay, Asil, I'm awfully sorry. Thank you very much for your very inspiring story. Thank you very much for your story. But you know, I have one very subjective question to a woman who is very successful in innovations. I'm the father of a 3-year-old girl. What kind of toys were you playing when you were a girl? Because, you know, my girl does not like any Transformers or Legos, but she likes dolls. I was helping a lot to my sisters, and it's a shame, but I really don't have any childhood because I was mainly reading. I was reading everything. Thank you. There is such a phenomenon which is called men. It's when only men are present during the panel discussion. I don't know Anton Maslov, and we had a risk that there will probably only women. With great pleasure, we decided to invite for this panel discussion Mr. Bruno Balvanelli, who is the representative of EBRD.
It feels a little bit awkward to be one of the very few men amongst this very good audience. So I should refer to you, dear ladies and few gentlemen. Good afternoon. I'm very pleased to see how much energy and how many emotions Asel, Rosa, have already inspired you with as being a woman. And I hope that despite being a man, and when I will be able to tell you my story, you will also feel the emotions that I have to be in this very important panel. With the Deputy Prime Minister, a woman, very good, and I think this is excellent because yesterday here in this same scenario there was only one woman, Madame Lagarde. The rest were men, and if you would have looked around the audience, we were all boring, as Asel said, old, fat, bald guys, gray hair. That was the audience. So I'm very pleased that today is very different. Yesterday was not like that. But of course, Madame Lagarde, she made this very nice comment saying, I hope this podium is not only for women, because otherwise it will not be very much used. Anyway, today, we have been talking a lot about digitalization and about inclusion. In many parts of this extraordinary economic forum, we have heard many different statistics about how much we are not taking advantage of the energy of the woman. It doesn't matter whether it is an advanced country or whether it is not advanced. It is clear that we are, as a world, as a community, we are missing an opportunity to have much more growth. Of course, this is much more accentuated in countries that are part of the development world, parts that have some religious or some legal constraints. In the world of EBRD, that we work in Central Europe, we work in Central Asia, in Eastern Europe, and in Northern Africa, we see particular differences in CEMED, in the southern Mediterranean, these are more kind of Arabic countries, in Turkey and in Central Asia. The potential to include women into the economic activity would be to increase GDP by 20, 30, even 40%. So it's not only a question of moral equality between men and women, it is an economic missed opportunity. Now, why is that? Why is this happening? And listening to Asel, you grew up in the steppes. You didn't have probably access to the education that many of us had. Despite that, you are a strong, committed, and delivering woman. But not everybody is like that. It is clear that the access to education, access to finance, access to resources, access to technology make it more difficult if not impossible, we saw it, just more difficult for women to be more successful. Now, let me tell you about my background. In addition to be one of these boring black suits bankers. I'm coming from a family where women have always had a very important role. My grandmother, and I'm not as young as you, my grandmother, who died at 98, 10 years ago, she was an entrepreneur when she was young, a successful entrepreneur. And the whole family grew out of what my grandmother produced. And this I'm talking about the Second World War. Going through the Second World War to have to immigrate and to start 2 or 3 times her own business. She was a very strong character. My mother inherited that. She studied, but she inherited this entrepreneur, and she was an entrepreneur. My first wife is today, I'm from Mexico, my first wife, Mexico, you may know, is one of the countries with high record of violence, but it's much more violence to women than to men. And she's now in Mexico. She's training women in the very remote villages how to defend themselves, how to be self-sufficient, how to be proud of themselves, how to demand the democratic rights to be mayor, to be senator, to be president, like Rosa, my good friend. That's what she's doing. My sister is one of the top biologists in the world. She recently was in Paris negotiating the details of the Paris Accord about the global warming and the commitments of every single country. My wife, she started a business where we lived in Tbilisi. She's a microfinance entrepreneur. But probably the one I'm most proud of is my daughter, probably the age of a cell, who is the most recognized designer, foreign designer in California. She was in the top page of a magazine that has been presenting the top designers in the US, being, after 10 years, the first foreigner and women to be in the cover page. So I am very proud of being and sharing with you this today. Professionally, EBRD is one of the leading institutions to take inclusion, and particularly gender inclusion, but you can talk also about young, you can talk about disabilities, you can talk about rural, but is one of the first IFIs to take inclusion as one of the key 3 objectives of the bank. And now, in every single project that we do, we need to find an angle. We need to find a way to help the inclusion of women, the inclusion of young people, and those who live in remote areas. How we do that? Basically through 4 different ways. The first is access to finance. In access to finance, basically what we do is we work with about 40 banks in 19 different countries, including Kazakhstan, including Kyrgyzstan, including Mongolia, where we work with these banks that are going to be financing women entrepreneurs. By the way, Rosa told you the story of her as a politician, and took some time. She could have tell you another fascinating story of her as an entrepreneur in digitalization, in fintech, which is amazing story. So companies like the ones that Rosa is having today can benefit from financing through the banks that we finance, that we encourage them to finance, and that we provide them what we call a first loss guarantee when the client is a woman. Meaning, if out of the portfolio of women there are some that do not pay back, we will pay back. And this is to help, to incentivize the banks and the managers to treat the financing request from women with great attention so that they don't care about the risk. But guess what? Women pay back better than men. So we're not losing money there. It's just, something that people have in their mind. And by the way, in my story as a banker and as a professional, my best colleagues with whom I have worked have always been women, whether as my manager or my subordinates. And this is why we are doing that. The second is we provide technical assistance. Why? Because of what we said. Maybe women did not have the same access to education as men. And it's not only the formal education, it's also a lot to build confidence, to build in their mind, you can do it, because you can do it, and we saw it. So we are running programs to empower, for women to feel that they can achieve. And of course, we go into accounting, although there's the tradition of the bugaltieri. Always we have had women bugaltieri in this part of the world. But we also need to empower women so that they believe that they can be successful. And we are having a number of events where we bring women, we praise them, particularly and especially to raise this pride and this mentality that they can do it. And we do that in Central Asia. We have a number of, we have a team dedicated to that. In Kazakhstan, we have two main offices, of course, Almaty and Nur-Sultan, but we have 5 more regional offices that are dedicated to help SMEs. And out of these SMEs, a good proportion is women in business with these programs that I have told you. So we have, in the banks, the first item that I mentioned, we have invested about 500 million euros. In these assistance and support on training, we have trained, out of all these 19 countries that I have mentioned, about 50,000 women over time. The third area is policy dialogue. And when we have projects, we try to encourage our borrowers to take conscience of the gender in their labor. And not long time ago, we financed buses in Tbilisi, and one of the programs was to train women to be drivers. And the first driver of the Tbilisi bus was a woman called Madonna. And we were all very happy to help Madonna to have a job. And by the way, she was a very good driver. It's just that in the mind of people, we think that women have more accidents than men. I'm sure that if you ask an insurance company, it will be exactly on the other way around. So we have programs to train managers, to incentivize them to give bigger role to women. Not only because women have less jobs and have less economic participation, but also because what we see is that the position that women have in organizations tend to be at lower level than men. And we also have seen all of our statistics that salary of women tend to be on the salary of men. But this is also why we are running all these programs. And finally, what we are doing is that we are working with different governments with regard to the regulations. There are countries, including Kazakhstan, where there is a code that forbids women to take certain employment. This list was a very long one, was 287 different jobs. Now it has reduced by 100, which is very good, but there are still 187 jobs that women cannot have. And these are jobs normally that are highly paid. Maybe they are riskier, maybe they are mining, maybe they are electricity. But if it is the choice of the woman to do that work, why not the woman could choose what she wants to do? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bolvanera. Using the opportunity, I would like to ask a question. You have broad experience in different countries. What couple of advices you can give about the policy to reduce gender inequality? What works, really works?
I think, first of all, to have a panel like today is extremely important, and it's a pity that we are very few men. And I hope that we would have been more men, that we believe in this, that we listen to you, and that we empower you. Second, I think this topic, and to be honest, we should all be ashamed that in 2019, we still need to talk about gender equality. We should take this for granted. We should be ashamed that we need to talk. We should be ashamed that we need to make an effort. This should be natural because we are men and women. We are the same. There is no difference. Now, I think it's very important, as I said, and I mentioned the example of Kazakhstan, that there is a list of jobs that are forbidden for women. I think we all need to work towards making this more open. Of course, we know also in some countries, in Saudi Arabia, where women only recently can drive, only recently can vote. You know, there are countries that are more behind than others. And I think globalization and internationalization will help us to understand that women and men who should have same opportunities, and it is, as I said, is not a moral duty to push for that, but is a missed opportunity in terms of economic output.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bolvanera, and thank you for your activities in our region. You contributed a lot, EBRD contributed a lot into creating economic opportunities here in the region. Друзья, мы продолжаем.
Friends, let's continue. Now I'm pleased to provide the floor to Gauhar Nurgalieva, head of the Eurasian Economic Research Laboratory of the Moscow School of Management, Skolkovo. Gauhar, the floor is yours. Good afternoon, colleagues, friends. I was very much pleased by the word by Ms. Rosa. Girlfriends, thanks for the organization and your hospitality. It turned out that I very rarely visit Kazakhstan, once a year, but every time I'm involved in Astana Economic Forum, I'm pleased to have a chance to speak to the prominent people present here. I would like to devote my presentation to the most remarkable women in my life, my grandmother and my mother. I would explain why. I present in many parts of the world, starting from Hong Kong, London, US, related to the international relations. And this is the first session about women leadership, where I have this presentation. And I'm happy that this choice happened in my motherland, in Kazakhstan, in Astana, and now Nur-Sultan. Let me start my presentation with a brief story about Skolkovo, Moscow School of Management, which is the lead school of management in Russia and Eurasia. When you come to our campus, you will probably visit it, I hope. This is one of the best campuses in the world. You will see the napkin where the idea of the campus and the school was drawn as a sketch, and the managers who are the best in the world are saying that if you cannot put your idea on the napkin, you don't know what you're talking about. So I would like to brief you within 10 minutes on the key ideas of my presentation. There are three of them. The first one is the education as the basis for competences. The second is corporate mentorship. And number three is entrepreneurial spirit and startup culture, women's startup culture, to be exact, because there are some specifics. I will explain that. The education opportunities. There's a very popular book of Michelle Obama, where she says, I quote, "The one thing people can't take away from you is your education, and it is worth the investment." In my social media, I wrote that it was Duma who was the first to say that, and Michelle Obama repeated that. Based on my experience, I would like to mention that indeed high-quality education that serves as the basis for your competence is the foundation that you can build the whole career and your life on. In my story, I used to work in Astana until 2010. Then I went for internship, and then I came back and met with my husband. He proposed to me, and I went to Moscow, and I got married in Moscow. We lived during the Soviet times, and finding myself in a new city, a new country where I had to start from scratch, I didn't know where to rely upon. Relying only upon my husband, it wasn't my nature, as I said from my very beginning. I devoted to my grandmother and mother, because already in the Soviet times my grandmother and grandfather believed in my mother and sent her to Moscow, and she paid a high price with her private life because she divorced with my father. because she went to Moscow, and then she applied the same approach and sent me to Washington, because in the Soviet times Moscow was the best place to study, and for the current Kazakhstan the best place to study was Washington. So when I came to Moscow, I said I thought I have a great CV, which was also the good accumulated expertise, but in such a big city as Moscow, it doesn't play a role. So I opened my notebook to find out my fellow students from Washington. One was in international finance, and second was the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy. And I made calls, and so my career in Moscow started. Therefore, saying that education should be of high quality, I would go a little bit further and say that unfortunately, and this is true, men would normally be evaluated through their capacity, which is seen by the partners, but the women are not assessed by the capacity or potential. They are assessed based on what your capabilities are. So for you to say that I can go and I can do, you have to rely upon what you already achieved. And Ms. Lagarde, when she chose the microphone, I think it was the same. She was saying that 65% of women are working. In our part of the world, there is no problem of education for women. Schools and universities are fine. Women can do it and can work a lot. But what do they face now? They have to face a big transparent ceiling, and it's difficult to break that ceiling and go up. And a bad soldier is the one who doesn't want to be a general. And why do you contribute so much in your education if you don't want to get the biggest and the highest role in the company or in the country where you live? Therefore, it's good that, Rosa, you have overcome that barrier, and you're a good benchmark for us. Everyone is saying why women don't manage, why they're not managers. There's a theory that they are not there because they psychologically cannot cope with the high temperature at such height or competences, and both is wrong. Because we have just seen that the key reason that the women do not get to the higher echelon of power and business, of education probably, or entertainment, because women do not participate in the informal networks, which is called network gap. For example, even here, when you come to see someone, women are sitting at one table, men are sitting at another table. Men would discuss business and new ideas, and the women would discuss what they are doing. And not always is the business or new ideas. What is happening as network gap? Then the men would go playing tennis or golf, and women are not invited as colleagues. So we are brought in such a way that men play separately, girls play separately, boys play separately, and there are no joint games or operations where colleagues can discuss. Quite often colleagues may go for dinner. Women would not participate because they have to go home and treat her children and family, and socially it's not custom here. This is the gap that matters, because during this informal communication, people discuss ideas, new opportunities, quite some hidden alliances in the corporate culture, and eventually the woman is outside this circle and they are not aware of what is happening underground. A terrific woman, Sandra Nevada, unfortunately it's not published in Russian yet. She's talking about financial wealth, which is the most competitive environment globally, which is Wall Street, and for women it's the most difficult task to do. And she is the investment banker, a lawyer who worked with one of the prominent economists, and she is now explaining womenomics. article where she describes all that stuff, and that was mentioned by Christine Lagarde. What is this network is obvious for everyone, but there is a notion of social capital. We quite often talk about social capital. Why? Because this notion of networking is wrong. I know somebody and nobody knows me. Social capital, and to be a capital, you have to be trusted. Your social capital is not the ones whom you know, but the ones who trust you. I mean, who can entrust you with valuable information, trust you that you can do some good work, and they are prepared to invest in you. And I would tell you examples of startups where they used, women used the social capital for the success. And social capital will be also based on your competences, and this comes back to education and your experience. This is coming back again to investments that are worth in education, and this is the most important that we as girls or women can do for our girls and for daughters. Ina Drew has been one of the longest serving chief investment officer in JP Morgan. This is one of the biggest financial institutions in the world, and it's difficult to work in such a bank. And she suggested this idea of the corporate mentorship. So you should have a person in the company who trusts you and with whom you have informal communication. This is speaking about the corporate culture. Corporate culture is a hierarchy, however, whereby the entrepreneurship is the horizontal structure. Hierarchy is horizontal structure is that there is a glass ceiling, but there are no glass walls, and this allows you to enter the corporate world. If you don't find yourself in this corporate world, then you can be better reflected in the entrepreneurship, because you don't have to waste your efforts to overcome this glass ceiling. This is the figure from ADB, $4.3 trillion by 2025 will demonstrate the growth of GDP if women are involved in the economics. These are the countries where I briefly demonstrate, and Kazakhstan is far from being included, and even Russia, who is good in gender equality, but still for the country, for business, for doing business for women, we are not good for that.
I wanted to mention several cases. I will probably give you two cases. And Rahim is also a member of my network because we were in the same program in Washington. I'm going to give you this story of Evgenia Budanova, who graduated from Startup Academy, and she had a personal problem with her health, but she managed to raise funds jointly with her friends, and she designed the site with one of her friends, and her friend chef gave her the recipes for all these foodstuffs. Zodia Rosamond, she is the founder of STEP portal. She's been in apprenticeship in Skolkovo, and the last one is one of my best friends, because we've been friends for 20 years. She's now the student in Skolkovo. She launched a project on healthy food, and she is still learning. She's there is Skin in the Game is one of the books, but I really trust my product so much that I decided to recommend this project to my best friend. And we also have some grants, and therefore high quality education can be provided not only to those people who can afford it, but to those people who can obtain a grant thanks to the competence and knowledge. So thank you very much for your attention. Rahim is already showing me that I'm abusing the time, and I would like to thank you, the audience, for your patience, and also I'm thankful to everybody not to interrupt women during their presentation, and it is also very nice that we have so many representatives not only from Central Asian countries but also from Russia, because to a certain extent we see not only similarities but differences, and there are some promising news that we are receiving from Russia. If you remember, in 1999 the sociologists made an opinion poll, and they asked who would you like, which heroes would you like to become presidents of the Russian Federation. Those were Stiglitz, but these days it's Ekaterina Tikhomirova, who is the carrier from Moscow Doesn't Trust Tears movie. Gohar, you wrote an article, which is a very interesting article in Step magazine, and you were talking there about the overlap of the ambition to success, and which has to be combined with some traditional values of the society and religious values, and based on the example of a woman who is professing Islam, will it be possible to make a career for such a woman? Well, you know, I'm only going to tell you about the movies which are Moscow Doesn't Trust Tears and Office Affair, and you know, I think that these stereotypes and the characters from all these movies are too much obsolete, but we know each other with Rahim for quite a long period of time, and I would rather refer and allude to our case. Our case is Skolkovo, but sometime in February 2016 the crew of Royal Brunei Airlines Boeing Dreamliner, which is one of the biggest aircrafts in the world, which was piloted by women, only by women wearing scarves. And, you know, at that time they arrived and landed in Saudi Arabia. And, you know, in both countries, all the women were Muslims professing Islam. And I think that there is no problem in the religion. The problem is in the society where the women live. You know, if you take the crew of women piloting the biggest ever aircraft in the world, landing in Saudi Arabia, where people were banned from driving the cars, is the best demonstration of the difference in the environment. I think that it's the issue of the let's say, structuring our society, and in which every woman will have the right and will have a possibility to implement her dreams. And of course, for this, we have to either find mentors or to be mentors. Thank you very much, Gohar. Dear friends, with a lot of pleasure, I would like to invite for our final presentation in this part of our event, the last but not least, Lezat Kazhetaevna Askarova, who is the executive director of Expo Women. And I would like to say that many speakers were complimenting the organizers, and the organizer is Boston Consulting Group and the International Expo Women, UNDP, and our Center Lab. And I would like to give the applause now to Lezat Kazhetaevna, because when we were preparing for this event, I was really so much impressed by the personal qualities of Lezat that I insisted on having her as one of the speakers. You know, I received this proposal only yesterday. It was pretty sudden and unexpected, so thank you very much for the trust that you are putting on me. I think that it's one of the key maybe qualities to be to trust each other. I would like now to bring everybody from sky down to earth, and let us talk about why we need to have gender equality. When I was making a presentation at TEDx, I would like to tell you that I'm the daughter of an officer who graduated from Ryazan military and political school, and in 60s and 90s there were not any more professional and more honest person, but a teacher, and therefore I have decided to become a teacher. My gender relations were very difficult and even more than difficult, because starting the age of 4.5 years old, I didn't have my mother. So my first gender crisis was at the age of 10, and when I told my father, you know, I need to buy a bathing suit, and my father said, why do you need it? You only need to have your pants. And you know, I took the needle, and then I made a bathing suit myself. But there were some other examples. I don't want to overload you with those upsetting examples, but I would like to state that before we talk about the gender policy, let us understand to what extent I'm identifying myself in terms of gender equality. The topic was to what extent the gender policy and our traditional family values are complementing each other or conflicting with each other. And I would like to state a few words about it. My ethnic identification was also very different, because I used to live in a military camp, and of course my communication language was Russian, and of course I loved so much Lermontov and Pechorin, the main character. I feel in my soul something something very vast, and then all of a sudden I was keen on astrology, and at that time I was already working in at school, and there was a class, one of the lessons which was dedicated to modeling the world in the semantics of dwelling, and it turned out that yurt is probably the best example, the prerequisite of any dwelling. And since then I became one of the best teachers in Kazakhstan, and at that time in 90s we were trying to find our own identity in this world. Am I just a particle, a sand particle, or I can do something? And I was trying to find my own identity throughout 90s, and I'm really very grateful to my destiny that at that time I worked in Pavlodar Mathematical School number 8, and 90% of my children were read Abai, and we were staging the performances after Al-Farabi, and I really loved it so much because my own perception of myself was improving. There is another picture. This is the Tengri calendar. It's a very nice cycle of the big time, which is actually a part of our Kazakh philosophy, and it is associated with the cycle of Jupiter, cycle of animal breeding, etc. What is gender? Now, I would say that I found myself in gender just by chance, because I came to an NGO to meet with women who are working on gender policy, and our first training was called Gender Starts With Me, and today I'm not supporting gender equality, but I would rather support gender compliance. If a woman will be compliant with her gender position, a man with his gender position, then there will be equality. Therefore, I'm supporting the equality and compliance. Do you know that the Kazakh word karindas is originating from Sinli word, and etc. So there is a lot of semantics in the Kazakh language. And if we try to rehabilitate the relationship in the family between a man and a woman, between the younger generation and the older generation, according to our semantics, I'm pretty sure that the terms that are identifying our relationships are gender sensitive, they are gender compliant. For example, Saukile, do you know what it means? I am not very fluent in Kazakh, but these are certain sayings that I understand. They are actually reflecting the relationships. And how many terms do we have that are designating the relatives in the Kazakh? How many? How many? Please give your guess. 40? No. 100? Who will tell more? 120. Therefore, every 3 days we have the reason to visit one of our relatives. And of course, we can talk about it a lot. Here is another picture. It is a scientific project of mine, which was awarded the first prize. And you see that sometimes we forget that we can be Apke, Karandas, and Li. And there is also the Institute of Kudalik, which used to be until the age of 14. Now it lasts for only 1 year, and everything is related to gender. And we forget about these relationships which are designating gender. And finally, I would like to state that my fate is such that I met with Aygul and Saltanat in Astana, but our gender organization is actually implementing beautiful projects such as, for example, Expo and Women, thanks to which we all have got together here. And I can tell you that I'm absolutely happy that my gender, ethnic and professional identification are very well streamlined, very harmonious. They are complementing each other. And I would like to thank our team, and I'm inviting you to visit our site where you will be able to find a lot of information. And very soon we are going to bring a team of rural women to Beijing. And in 2015, Saltanat brought 200 women from Kazakhstan during Astana Expo. We also invited a lot of women, and in 2020 we will bring women to Dubai. Please join us. Thank you very much, Lazat. Let's give her a big hand. Lazat. I would also like to mention that what you stated very correctly, and the topic of your presentation is very close to me. There is a national commission, and it's not just a national commission on women's affairs and on family and demographic policy. And I believe that here we are actually putting on agenda a lot of various issues, because you cannot consider the gender issues without considering the issues of families and children. We have already wound up this part of our discussion. Now I would like to invite you to participate in our online survey. And you can find this particular link in your smartphones. It'll take you roughly about 30 seconds, maybe 1 minute. You will be able to answer questions available there. Please show us the questions on the screen. And while you are filling up the questionnaire and answering the question, I would like to invite the participants of our panel discussion. It's first of all the managing director from BCG Istanbul, Celia Garcia Barnes, Alexander Ackerman, manager on government and public relations of Coca-Cola, Talgat Narikbayev, director of KazGU University, named after Maksud Narikbayev, Aygul Salavyova, who is the chairman of the Association of Ecological Societies of Kazakhstan, and Sultanat Rahimbekova, who is the president of the Expo and Women. Could you please show us the link again? Please show us the presentation, which we prepared to start our discussion, to heat it a little bit, but I would like everybody to get relaxed, because I don't consider that my cognitive skills are radically lower than the average level, but nevertheless, when we are getting interested in gender equality and when we are trying to understand what it is, it's very difficult for us to have a full picture of what gender equality is. Maybe it's because very often such topics are considered to be kind of inconvenient for discussion, but nevertheless I would like to call on all our participants to do so, because for example, even though in this audience there are not so many men, maybe because the gender equality topic is ignored by men, or they do not understand it, or they perceive it as absolute domination and prevalence of men, and some men believe that implementation of gender equality can be resolved roughly like this, as you see it on the screen, but roughly about there are 130 million girls at the age from 6 to 17 years, and they do not attend schools, and only 89% of the girls all over the world will get secondary education. And last year the World Bank published a report about missed opportunities, according to which they assess that the world economy, global economy, is losing from 15 to 30 trillion dollars per year because girls don't have access to education. Gauhar quoted a number of 4.5 or 5 trillion. And of course, being economists, we are so much impressed by these numbers because the global GDP represents roughly about 80 trillion. Therefore, this delta from 15 to 30 trillion, of course, is very impressive. It is shocking us. And how, therefore, the question is how many boys do not have access to education, and what is the loss in this regard? Should we consider the gender equality issue from this perspective? If we take a look at the report on global gender equality that was published in 2018, then we will see that Kazakhstan is placed 69 in the index of gender inequality,
which is above Russia but lower than Belarus. And we can see that it is quite predictable that the countries that lead in the ranking, Iceland, Norway, and Sweden, we suddenly see Rwanda here, which is number 6. So this phenomenon will also need to be considered, and I may say that like many of us who analyze data and rankings understand that all these rankings do not reflect everything. In Rwanda, as far as we understand, women are very widely present in the parliament, and this is why the ranking is so high. However, there is a very big question mark to what extent the gender inequality is present in the country. In Kazakhstan, the situation in the salary gaps also leaves much to be desired, and we are very much shocked and surprised by the figures in 3 western regions of Kazakhstan. For example, Mangistau, in an average, women would receive only 42% of the salaries of men. And in the presentations previously, the average level globally is 77%. The gap is apparent, but still we shouldn't ignore the fact that there are men, when we look at the aspect of the family and the Institute of Family in Kazakhstan, unfortunately, based on this survey that was carried out 9 years ago, based on census, about 1 million of children are dependent in complete families, and about 300,000 are brought up by men, and 500,000 children have no parents at all. And I would like to refer to all these figures and ask the first question to Asli Kurbay, the partner and managing director of BCG Istanbul. What is your attitude to these multifaceted parameters of gender inequality, which sometimes conflicting, and if they do conflict, they have to be related to our traditional approach to gender equality or gender roles? The floor is yours. Microphone, please.
So starting with the gender pay gap, I think you mentioned very important statistics on that front. When we talk about gender pay gap, there are 2 dimensions. The first one is controlled pay gap. It means the same pay for the same job, which is a human right, which is a moral responsibility for all of us to make sure that it happens. So I think in this century, it's even a pity to be still discussing about that. But several governments are working on that, and the progress is kind of solid. However, the other part, which is the uncontrolled pay gap, is significant. It's estimated to be 20%, 30% less the women are earning less than men. And the main reason of this is not only about the starting salaries, but it's mainly coming from how women progress in their career and how they are getting the non-discretionary benefits based on their performance. And when we start to talk about this gender diversity, most of the companies are working on this because they are also aware that they are creating value, not only for the national economy, but also for their businesses. We have surveyed several companies, and we have seen that the revenue from innovation is significantly higher, 20 points higher in companies which utilize diverse gender in their workforce. This is even also related to the Kazakhstan's new economic strategy, which we have been hearing about. And on that front, diversity measures alone does not work sufficiently enough if they are not supported with inclusion. Because if you don't include the women to the workforce as they are, if you are trying to convert them to act like men are doing, you don't get the best out of them, and it doesn't create what we are looking to get from that. And as BCG, we are working on this topic a lot for 2 dimensions. One is that we are working to make sure that we have a diverse and inclusive workforce for our people, as we are a people business. But we are also working on the research part to create recommendations for nations, to create recommendations for companies on how to make this better. And recently, we surveyed more than 17,000 employees in 21 countries, and the results were striking in a certain sense, and which it is that women and men responded to the same survey, and we see that the way women see the problems are significantly different than how men see the problems are happening. So it's not a surprise probably when men and women think differently again. But I think it's very important because men believe that it is generally coming from the pay and it's coming from the recruiting part, which is the entering to the workforce level, while women think that it's more about retention, while it's more about advancement. And we talk about retention and advancement, we talk about the network capital, we talk about the glass ceiling that my colleagues have been discussing so far. And it's our responsibility to be solving all of these problems. And the other striking finding was that when women focus on the women's initiative alone in their companies, the success is like 30%. But when men get involved in these initiatives, the success rate increases to 90%. So men needs to be involved in the women diversity and women inclusion topic. It is not a woman's problem alone. Women cannot solve this alone, and it's very important that we have you. Although we don't have you a lot in this audience, but please make sure that at least we have you in the business audience for these problems.
Thank you. Celia, I would like to ask you the same question I asked before about how we can stimulate the participation, how we can encourage women in how we can promote women in innovations in business.
Well, the promotion of women in any business or innovation or science or any other sector is not a alone problem. It's for the whole economy. And I would say it could be key, and it has been mentioned before, the education access. It is very important that education is reached to women in every single dimension and in every single sector. And especially also, as previously Nur-Sultan mentioned, networks are very important for women to access the sector. Networks and mentorship arrangements are key. It is proven that when women see women on the lead, the participation of women increase, both in education, even if it's the dean of a department is a woman, it is from any STEM education background, it is normally result in the inclusion of more women taking those courses. And another aspect, I think it could be very key to have policies to enable the participation of women. This could be from gender quotas to just policies to ensure a conducive work environment, including flexi-time arrangements, parental leave, paid parental leave, both for mothers and fathers. And in general, also removing restrictive laws, as Val Navera commented in his speech. It's crucial to have a levelized playing field for both women and men. And last but not least, I think it's crucial to also challenge the cultural and social norms. This includes the perception of gender roles and unfortunately also the self-perception of women. So changing this is the only way to enable the participation of women in every sector.
Thank you. Вот уже второй раз упоминается в
It is already for the second time that as a serious barrier to the career promotion of women is the networking, which is mentioned as a barrier, which is little involvement of women in networking and communication with men. And therefore, there could be very strict policy in harassment and such other phenomena whereby the woman is a priori guilty, and it's enough even just to charge him for harassment in our era of post-truth. Even outside any court decisions, it could immediately give some tangible consequences. Do you think that it can have even more problems for men to be more cautious to involve women in informal communication because it can cause certain risks? I don't know of any studies, but I guess that such processes are already happening in major corporations. Aygul, what do you think about it? I have never worked in major corporations, and I don't know, I have never seen men harassing me informally. I don't know why. Therefore, I believe that when we are talking about gender, this could somehow distort the situation that is happening in informal communication, because it could be a distortion, because quite often in some Western movies I could see that the women who take high positions may discriminate men as well and can harass them as well. And this is probably the remaining stereotype that there's only one person to blame in between the two. And probably this is because our social roles are distributed in such a way that the man is always powerful and is always a driving force. Therefore, they are becoming apparently guilty. And probably we will overcome this period, and men will not get into the informal relation with other men, but be as tactful and cultural enough to communicate with women, network with women, following the equality principles. And in this case, the situation may change, may improve. And you know, the salary distortions was discussed a lot today, but there is a pyramid where on top we always have men. That's why the jobs are higher paid, and since in this pyramid the women are at the lower stages of career promotion, this gives a chance for men somehow to influence through informal relations to ensure this career promotion. And women are quite reliant, and they believe that this can work. I think that if we have equal access to everything and women become equal partners in both high career and at high positions, then I believe that the process of the fact that the community split by gender will put fault on the other part. That's, I hope, will remove gradually. In your view, what do you think? Is it the fault of men because of the inequality, in this glass ceiling or whatever? I don't think it's so much the guilt, but the stereotype that the man should lead, should manage. And I think that the women should have sufficient level of freedom so that they do not fear to overcome it and move ahead. And if she moves, then she will see that there is no glass ceiling. Probably you have to get rid of being obedient and following your mentality that I have to give way to a man. If we overcome this, I think in this competition, in our knowledge, and today a lot was said about access to education and in the character bringing in the family. And I think that gender issues mean not only promoting gender equality, but also equal attitude, equal relations in the family. And if the man takes half of the domestic work, he will give some freedom to the woman to be able to self-realize. And if this gender equality is followed in the family, the woman would have better chances to express herself, to achieve her objectives, and be more and be freer. And this opportunity is available now, because many domestic things can now be given to others if woman is sufficiently paid. And in the Western countries, even men can go for maternity leaves, and the woman can come back to work. It's for the family to decide based on the economic advantages to the family. So everything starts with the family, and if the woman has this degree of freedom, then, as it was correctly mentioned today, I will not be afraid to insist on myself being in the front, and you shouldn't sit in the corner as the gray mouse. And I think that the men will take a proper attitude to it. I think your example is quite inspiring, because if even though somebody built a glass ceiling for you, you have managed to break it. We are members together with Aygul of the monitoring group, and she's the leader there, and I have this feeling, and I didn't see any better leader here.
Gender equality in corporations.
Спасибо, со мной можно по-русски.
You can speak Russian to me. I think that I'm not invited to this panel by chance as a representative of a company, because Coca-Cola is probably one of the most global companies present in all countries of the world except Cuba and North Korea due to political reasons. And also because the company has one of the most advanced and benchmarking policies in support to the SDGs. In our company, globally, in all countries, we have initiatives that support all the 17 SDGs. And this is, I can discuss two aspects. Number one is the internal aspect. For example, I'm from the Istanbul office responsible for Central Asia and Caucasus and Turkey. I would like to give you the quote from Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, who said that if there is peace in the house, there will be peace everywhere in the world. That is, all the changes have to be started from your home. In Coca-Cola, we employ 70,000 people together with our partners and as bottlers who bottle our drinks. It will be 700,000 people. If we add multiplier effect about 10, that is, we take the entire value chain and distribution, it will be 10 times more, which is about 7 million staff of the system employed. During the last 10 years, the company spent more than $600 million to promote the issues of inclusiveness and gender equality in the entire system, including the supply chain, including the distribution chain. And we have projects in the motherland of Mr. Balvaner in the remote places and the most developed countries. We audit that and we monitor that. As for the gender equality, the task of the company is to ensure that at least half of the management, top management of the company is women. However, there is no time frame for that because this process is quite complex. But as of the end of last year, the top management included 32% of women. At the same time, if we're talking about the mid-level managers, it's about 45% and 51% among the experts and professionals. In Istanbul office, it's in fact half of the top management, including the president of the business department, are women. And the previous president was also a woman. She was promoted to the global vice president on strategy of the entire Coca-Cola company. She left for America, and at the end of last year, she became the president of one of the biggest business department of Coca-Cola business unit. And normally, the woman would head the HR department, and our technical director is also a woman, and most of our technical staff are women, and they're responsible for everything related to certification of products, of factories, of monitoring quality, certification of suppliers. That is very technical issues. They are now the responsibility of women in our region. Another aspect that could be mentioned is the social responsibility programs. In 2010, Coca-Cola has undertaken to provide technical support to 5 million women of the world by end of 2020. And yesterday, Ms. Lagarde, in her presentation, mentioned that the economic barriers should be removed for women. If you remove economic barriers, you will ensure gender equality. And this is indeed so because based on the UN data that we mentioned today, women do about 75% of their work globally, but they earn much less, about 10% of the global revenues.
And they own roughly about 1% of the global real estate. And at the same time, the lion's share of the economic revenue is yielded by the entrepreneurial activities. And this is the reason for which we decided to focus our efforts on the entrepreneurship as well. Starting 2012 in Kazakhstan, there is a program which is called the Steps of Growth, which provides a program for women in the rural areas. We are implementing it together with the coalition of the Association of Environmental Associations in Kazakhstan. And at the same time, there is the program of grants, and every woman can actually submit an application. We will help her to put together a business plan, and the women can obtain a micro grant in the amount of roughly about $4,000 During 6 years, more than 50 women won such grants, and they are successfully developing their business. And our partners keep in very close touch with these women. We try to support the women, and we arranged a trip for them to Beijing. In the framework of that program, these women have already created more than 100 jobs, mostly in their environment and their families. But why we support women? It's because women are the basis, the economic basis of the society. More than 90% of the revenues gained by women, they tend to reinvest in their own families and society. So if a woman is well off, the society will be well off. Thank you very much, Alexandra. Talgat, there is another question about the achievement of gender equality. It's a global process, and it now is becoming a reality in every region, but to a certain extent it is conflicting, it is clashing against our traditional understanding of gender equality and religious values. Who do you think should adapt to who, to what? Thank you very much, Rahim. But I was just wondering, when I received an invitation from you, why you have decided to invite me. I'm a man. I'm young. Maybe I will be able. Yes, I'm the manager. Then I was wondering, you know, I'm very conservative. I'm very traditional. Do you really need my participation here? And I received the answer, yes. Why I'm so conservative? Of course, we cannot do away without women. A man can do nothing without a woman, because a woman gave birth to us. And the very first contact with a woman took place during pregnancy in the bellies of our mothers. And then we were born to this world thanks to our mothers, and etc., etc. So this contact is maintained even now, and therefore what we are talking about here, we say that a woman is probably the best profession, a profession of being the mother, because the mother is bringing up children, not so much a man, because a man is out of the house, and therefore, when we see that men started becoming weaker, we understand very well why it happens so, because women became stronger. And we have a reversed situation when men may abandon their families, and women with 8 or 10 children. This is what we watch on television almost every day, and they continue bringing up the children. Why? Because such men who were abandoned by their wives were brought up by their mothers. So there is a need for a balance. For example, if you take our university, you will find the following data. All in all, we have 247 women working in our university. This is representing 64%. The managers out of these women represent 65%. PhDs represent 76%, professors 25%, and doctors PhDs 21%. So it's high time for men to be protected. For example, if you take my boss, Kulash Samsidinova, she is a woman. She is in the Ministry of Education. Her manager, who is in charge of social issues and education, is the Vice PM of Kazakhstan. She has just been here, and she is a woman as well. Gulsharan Abdikalikova. And she used to be the state secretary before. Therefore, I believe that we don't have any problem with gender equality in Kazakhstan, because the women are raising higher and higher, and men go lower and lower. And I believe that probably here in Kazakhstan we have to talk about the finding balance. Why is there so much difference in the wage level? Again, probably everything depends on the title, on the position, because anyway, men still maintain the position of the breadwinners. For example, if you take a situation in China, if you've heard about corruption, for example, if a young woman, a young girl is very well dressed, then in China they will start video surveying such a young woman, and finally they find out that she is sponsored by one of the civil servants. Why I am talking about it? Of course, men have more responsibility, the responsibility for their families, and this is the way it should be, and this is the reason for which men are a little bit better paid. I am not stating that the salary, the wage level is equal. I believe that a woman should be carried in our hands. Why? Because a woman gives birth, a woman brings up their children, a woman gives everything else to us. This is the reason for which I believe that a woman should be lifted higher, but not as a civil servant, not like a soldier. We should not transform a woman into a man. That's my opinion. Thank you. Please applause. I believe it's very good to have Talgat in our panel discussion, because it's a very well spread opinion of pretty successful men who make women close to them very happy. But nevertheless, what is really irritating me in such approach is a kind of a superficial approach, when people believe that yes, gender equality is important, but we don't know how it is implemented in practice. And I believe that we still don't have an in-depth analysis of gender equality. I wouldn't reiterate on the very well-known truism that a very successful man is usually built by a successful woman. And I would like to say that Sultanat, for example, is the wife of one of the candidates to the president, who is going to run the presidential election. She is very active in entrepreneurship, social and public life, but nevertheless, you've got a very successful husband, a very successful family. I'm interested in your point of view on these issues. Well, you know, I think that it is really very important. I will probably disagree with Talgat, because what is really very important is that a woman and a man should feel equal responsibility to each other, because when a family is appears, who should make more money? It depends on luck, because somebody is better paid, somebody is not that well paid. It happens so that social workers are not very well paid. But what if a woman has become an entrepreneur and is making a little bit more money? There is no problem, because if there is harmony, then this couple will be very happy. As Talgat said that yes, men should make a living, and the women should bring up their children. Well, you know, I will give you an example of my husband. When my husband is coming back home, usually I embrace I give a hug to my husband and I'm asking him, what's new today? What was good during the day today? And you know, when Talkat was talking about it, I think he gave me a model, and you know, I thought back that my husband is doing it in a very right way. When each time when he is coming back home, he is giving a hug to his children, his grandchildren, to me. And unfortunately, we didn't do it when we were raised by our families, because and when we had our children, because when we started our careers in the 90s, there was disintegration of the Soviet Union, and we were too much concentrated on well-being. Maybe well-being is not going to occupy the secondary importance in our relationships, but we probably did not pay enough attention to our children at that time. And it happened so that we had our university and then postgraduate courses in Moscow, and we had to choose where should we get back. And I told him, why don't we return to Almaty, because we graduated from the same university, agricultural university in Almaty. And then he said, well, you know, cooperatives are so widely developed now in Almaty, we will not be able to find jobs. I said, okay, let's go to Karaganda. And he said, it will be very difficult. But I said, then let's go to Shymkent, because I was born in Shymkent. And he said, no, definitely we will not go to Shymkent. And we decided to go to Zhezkazgan. In Zhezkazgan, we started our labor career, and we started from scratch. We didn't have any housing. We decided to buy. We didn't have a job. We created a job. Our children grew there, and I think that back in the 90s, a lot of people were going through a lot of negative experience, such as racketeering, for example, and we lived through racketeering as well. But what is the key issue that I remember from those time is the support of the people with whom we were working. And I was very lucky to work with people, and I always felt from them the need in me. And this is the reason for which I would like to ask, how many of you are leaders of NGOs? Please raise your hands. The heads of NGOs. Yeah, I know that there are many more people, because I know how many brilliant NGO women leaders are here. And the reason for which I'm emphasizing it is because when the women join NGOs, which looks like depend on budget applications or on grants, how to put together a network, how to become useful. I believe that women who are leaders in NGOs are incentivized by not the money issues or well-being, but they are inspired by the contacts with people, by networking with people. I would like to give you an example. The project that was mentioned by Alexandra to train rural women. We've been involved into this program for seventh year, and starting the 7th year, we decided to involve into this work the representatives of NGOs, and they supported our initiative, and they can visit 20, 30, or even 50 and 60 villages, and it's their contribution. It's a kind of corporate and social responsibility of NGOs, and this is the reason for which they are very actively involved into training rural women. Getting back to the issue that was raised by Rahim, I would like to state that when a woman can implement her ideas, the most important thing is not how much a woman is making, but what we bring to these people. Maybe our kind approach, maybe our usefulness, protection, and Gulnara Bayan and many others are present here. They're representing different NGOs, but what we can do to those with whom we cooperate and work together. This is the most relevant thing. I believe that when you implement yourself as a politician or as a businessman, anyway, you will go to NGO. Rosa Isakovna, for example, is a very successful president of the country. She is a very successful woman, and she had a key to the country in her hands. It's a very small but very ambitious and proud country. What way will she choose? And during that very difficult, very challenging period in the history of Kyrgyzstan, a very wise woman became the president, and she laid down the foundation which will definitely protect the people of Kyrgyzstan from great shocks. And it was back in 2010 and 11, and today we are in 2019, and Rosa Isakovna is calling on all women to become wise and ambitious and be useful for mankind. And I believe that this model will never become obsolete, because it will always help our society to develop. Again, I would like to reiterate, we have 2 grandchildren in my family. And it happens so that since childhood, our Yelbasi, as if he was participating in the life of our families, because we were doing business at that time in Zhezkazgan. And during that period of time, the president met with entrepreneurs from all regions of Kazakhstan, and we always were participating in such meetings. And, you know, 3 or 4 times I was making presentations, I was asking questions, and I had an opportunity to communicate with my president. And my small granddaughter Aliya used to tell me, well, you know, as if I feel as if the president is participating in the life of our family. This culture is still retained. It is still in place. And every time when Aliya watches the president on television, she is saying, oh, look, our grandfather is making a statement, is making a speech. Let's listen to him. I would say that if there are culture and traditions in the family, and children's upbringing is is based on the values of our elderly people. For example, we have a proverb: when a 7-year-old boy or girl is coming to a family, then an elderly person who is 70 years old is approaching the boy or the girl and is shaking hands with them. Therefore, it's very important to maintain our traditions. Our today's panel discussion was subdivided into 2 parts. In the first part, we were talking about our success stories, and this is the reason for which I believe such platforms, dialogue platforms, are very important. When Aselia or Gauhara are telling us about how they are conquering the international companies and other countries, but I would like to say that such panel discussions, well, you know, I think that I should have given you the word during our first panel discussion. I would like to get back to your ideas, but let us be dynamic, and I would like to ask you very short questions and looking for very short answers. The 5th Sustainable Development Goal number 5. We need some positive discrimination, and one of the indicators is equal representation of women in parliaments, in the leading positions, top management positions. And Alexandra was talking about the corporate policy, that there is a certain quota for women in top positions. Other economists claim that if there will be a gender selection rather than competence selection, they doubt that such indicator will be well justified. Do you think that such a discrimination can be justified, and what other indicators can reflect gender equality?
Before answering your question, I would like to open 30 seconds and share a perspective. When we were starting the Women at BCG initiative in Istanbul office, we also invited our male colleagues to join us to discuss the actions to take. and they joined. One of them, when I was talking to him, said that I would like to learn how I can protect women in business place. This is not the woman diversity, this is not the inclusion of women into the business place. This is not about men taking women upside. Women will be growing themselves, women have the capability. What is important is creating opportunity and creating fairness for them. And with this perspective, when we start talking about quotas or positive discrimination to the extremes, I think it will be dangerous and it will be starting to question women's capabilities. Is she there because she's a woman, or is she there because she really deserves it? So this is a very sensitive topic. In certain areas, it may work, but in the top business areas, I think quota can be creating certain challenges, and it should be taken carefully very much. Before getting into measures like quota, companies need to make sure that they are really working on the retention issues. They are really creating role models where women look up to and where they can also see that they can succeed like them.
Thank you. Syria, please. So the same question.
Well, I agree. I think trying to levelize the playing field is fair for women. We comprise anyway 50% of the population, but it's true that the gender quotas cannot be taken lightly. It's not something that has to be set in place from one day to another. It's something, it depends on the context, and of course, first of all, you need to have the woman qualify for that. So again, we go to the topic about how education is key and is crucial to have this woman empowered enough and capable enough to have that position. So that could be the first point. And then again, I'm sorry, but I'm going to go to the cultural, challenging the cultural norms and gender roles perception. And again, to the self-perception of both women and men. I think women have to believe that we can do it, and men also have to believe that they can raise their children and they can also get paid less than women without being less of a man. So again, this all goes together.
Alexandra?
You know, it is quite interesting that the first ones who introduced the quota for the number of women in the BODs was Sweden, who is considered to be the top one in gender equality. Therefore, if we talk a lot about these things and do nothing, you need to apply some kind of a stick. And I think already at the initial stage, when the country is at the very initial stage of the gender equality principles, I think it may make sense to introduce certain quotas, and because it will be creating somehow conditions for better education for girls and women, for softer career start and so on. It will just make the employers think about it. In our company, when a CV is supplied to the manager who will hire the person, the CV will have no personal information, date of birth and picture and so on. These are also some kind of standards. What kind of other indicators could be included to better reflect the gender equality? Well, I think that we should be talking about the cultural indicators, because culture is a very important part, because our company, when we go somewhere, we are saying that we are global, but we operate locally, and we try to respect the local values. And in my view, we should be very careful about the gender equality with reference to the gender with the local culture. Some indicators have to be related to the culture, because if in Sweden a man opens the door to the woman and lets her in, it will be an insult for the woman. For me, it is a distortion, though I am quite independent, but still this is not right, in my view. Talgat? You already mentioned and you asked why women are presented better, but their salaries are lower. Probably because they are more present in the social sector. Probably, unfortunately, the social sector has lower salary, and I think that we could increase the salaries in that sector to a very high level, because this is the issue of the future for the country. So that's what I mean. We don't need to change anything. Women are very well presented. Nobody is prohibiting them. Nobody is creating, as I say, me as a manager, I do employ women to the top position, and without any prejudice, whether she's a woman or man. I'm not guided by that, so I don't think that there is a problem. But the only thing that we need to do is to increase the salaries in the social sector. And in this case, the data that you were talking about will very much fit to the fact that our salaries of our women will be higher. To explain some of the figures, they really distort the reality, because lots of women are involved in the house, in domestic activities, and they work at home. And this labor is not paid formally, and it's not included in the salary statistics. That's why our perception is like this. At the same time, in the families, there is a gender role when you have to give your salary to your wife. And this doesn't change. Eventually, the woman will manage all the processes, because you give all the salary to her. Then she manages all the cash. Then, therefore, who is the real manager in the family? This is a rhetorical question. Sultan, this is the question to you. You only have 30 seconds to take. If I answer this question, I support in principle, if we want to involve women in politics, in power, we need quotas, we need some support. In answering your question whether we need to raise the salary level in the social sector, yes, this is an important focus. Number 3, your question is very right, that there was one gender study that the women from early morning to late evening would do their homework, and some people can hire the people who will do this on a payment basis, and if the woman is more focused on raising children in the proper way, there should be the support system for the families with many children, and for growing children there should be some social support. That's why I'm in favor of having a proper gender policy in power. This is one focus. Secondly, we need to support our mothers with good payments and good benefits with the salary support. This is great. By the way, when we studied in the postgraduate, we had the scholarship, and our salary was preserved, maintained, so that we would come as good specialists back to our universities. So this kind of support is necessary. One more question, very briefly, that I would like to raise about the family institution. In Kazakhstan, the statistics shows that we drastically have a reduction of the number of marriages, whilst previously it was 160,000 marriages. Now it's around 130,000 marriages. And the number of divorces is growing. Previously it was around 50,000, and now every 1/3 of the marriages get broken. As I said, almost half of the children are growing in incomplete families. How does this correlate to the emancipation and gender, and how does this correlate with the gender policy? What do you think?
It is, first of all, directly related to the gender policy. The way I would interpret the development in this KPI would be about people, as both men and women become more economically independent, more aware of what they can do and what they should do, and more aware of how happy they are within their marriage. If they get more flexible in taking different decisions, and I think it comes with the overall cultural development and overall increasing social media, increasing how you can get connected to news and learn about different opportunities. I think this is the development of life, and it doesn't specifically relate to the women diversity in that sense.
Celia, thank you.
I'm not an expert in the field, but I totally agree. I think it's a natural evolution of the in the new century, and probably also new family types are coming, and single, both ladies and men can be on their own. So I guess it's an evolution of society in general.
Everywhere.
Everywhere.
Alexandra.
Я согласна, да.
I would tend to agree that this is the result of the economic revolution and independence of both genders, and even more than that, and big opportunities that we have. Now a person alone can reach the heights that were impossible to reach beforehand, and the families stayed together previously in more cases because there were no other opportunities or hobbies or career opportunities or whatever. And now people are becoming more and more impatient and more independent, and they don't want to be restrained by anything. Unfortunately, their families can be considered as restraining factor. Unfortunately, this could be unfortunate, but this is the global trend. And what do you think this can bring us in the future? I think this is a serious erosion of the family matter. I think this will be exacerbated further, yes. Talgat? I think we should look at Europe, where the European population is declining, where they have less children. I think they're having -1 child already per family. Which means that the whole population is dying out. And why is that? Coming back to the European values of the 20th century, I don't think this would have happened if they followed their true historical values that they rely upon. They would have had the increase of the population. And now, because of the gender equality, they result in that when they marry at being 40 years old and even older, and as a result, they don't want to give birth. And I spoke to one Italian, and he says, why should I do that? I have to spend my money on children. The same is happening with gender equality. If we go too far, we will have the same. So I don't think we should be absolutely equal, or even women being above men. I think this is inevitable because we are propagating new values here, which is gender equality. But we are not advocating the traditional family values, and we are raising girls in the context of being able to demonstrate their career prospects. The prospects should be there to raise those children. They should have the education. They should be access and all the opportunities to women again. But again, the best profession is raising children. Every family is responsible for the future of the family population of the planet. Every school, every university is responsible for the future of the planet, of the earth and of the family. Therefore, I believe that raising children or upbringing is the most important. I think it's not so much due to the fault of the gender, but this is rather a challenge of today. And when we raise children in our families, we give them the feeling of the only and the unrepeatable, and they can conquer the world. But again, I would like to mention that we have to advocate our family values, and our country is at the era when we can explore that. And for that, we need to have proper TV programs. It's good that Astana and Almaty, they're the big cities, but in the regions, all the children stay near the TVs. I can give you one example. I asked Asel, she has 3 children. I asked her, what language do your children speak? They all speak Kazakh, though they study in America. Whilst if during the night the woman reads the fairy tales in Russian or Kazakh, it could be mother or father if he has this opportunity. Therefore, it is extremely important that the family values are in our hands. And as a summary of our panel session, let's say, yes, at least in our family, probably Rahim would disagree with me, but I would still say that in any case, for the woman, the family is the priority number 1. and the fact that before 2025 they will decide who would be their partner to get married, and not every girl would think about their career at that stage. Therefore, the career issues may come up by 30 or 40 years if the family didn't happen. This could be debated for ages. Let's preserve our family values and raise our children saying that they will have the future of their family, nice country, if they take their family as well as their country. I would also tend to agree. Let's talk for the best and against everything that is bad. Let us now look at the survey outcomes, and then we will try to comment on those together with our panelists. Can we see them on the screen? Before the outcomes are brought to the screen, let's have another question. You would like to ask a question? Yes, let's have a couple of questions from the audience. Good afternoon, my name is Güzel. I would like to raise the question to Talgat because he has a viewpoint which I would rather disagree with. But my question is, you are the rector, the manager of one of the leading universities that would graduate future law enforcement people. And I think you should have mentioned the current status that in your law schools you don't have the specialties that would graduate the specialists that would be oriented at the protection of rights of women or men. It doesn't matter, but from the point of view of gender, because this is exactly why this is in fact the indicator whether the genders are equal or unequal in the country. It's not so much the matter of the salary, but when a woman or man comes to a court or any public institution, a woman in our society will find out that there is no specialist who will be aware and who will be specialized in assessing the gender issue that the woman comes with. Thank you very much, Güzel. Very briefly, please. Thank you very much for this question. Indeed, the rights should be protected, not only regarding gender, but all the people have to be protected, and families. We have the legal clinics when the students together with our teachers would protect the rights of the vulnerable people who have no money to pay for protecting their rights. And women and girls can speak in the court, and even the judges can fail because we have very knowledgeable students and teachers. Let me now discuss the outcomes of this study. The question that we raised, would you agree that the traditional values are in conflict with gender equality issues? About one-third of them, one-fourth of our audience consider so. Whether men will suffer from inequality, the majority would disagree. Should the homework be considered as work and should be paid and provided with social guarantee? Up to 60% agreed to that, and more than 60% of the audience supported the quota policy. Friends, I don't think we have contributed a lot in the discussion of such complex issues, but still we provided a thought-provoking opportunity to the audience. To finalize, I must say that the difference between the survival years is 7 years. For women, it's 76. For men, it's 67. And there is a hypothesis that in the countries with the gender balance being better and gender policy being more successful, it's a win-win situation. And mostly it's beneficial for men because they bear less stress. And in Iceland, when everything is great, the difference between men and women is 3 years. Thanks a lot for your participation. Let's give a round of applause to our speakers. And I would like to express gratitude to our co-organizers, BCG Group, Expo Women, project for the UN Development Project, and our Center for Economic Research. Thank you.
Если кто-то желает присоединиться к нам.
If anyone is willing, you can come up to the stage to make a family photo.